and we invited Norma to speak to us in Kearney. It was a refreshing and delightful experience, and I've been thinking a lot since then about how we manage parenting time in South County and hopefully across the state in different and more creative ways. So Norma works with the Institute for Human Services.
No, I'm retired. Yeah, I'm retired. Everyone write that down. That's it.
One of the wonderful things that Norma and I have in common is that we are experienced social workers.
But sure.
Social workers have been in this business for a long time. And Norma has done, as we heard yesterday, some wonderful work with children in her home and also in the programs and with the organizations that she has worked with. And there's a little more of her bio in your binder if you want to hear more about her. So I know we want to hear what she's saying, so let's welcome Norma Ginther.
Good morning. Good morning. I heard the previous speaker, who I was still trying to get everything together, didn't get to hear, was just great. Good. That's what conferences are for. Not always to give us fabulous new information, but to rejuvenate us with people who still like and care about what they do. I think that's always exciting. I wanted to give a couple of you just a second, because we don't have much time. Each one of these is going to be an exciting hour trip. Does anyone have, there's a couple of chairs up here, and we might be able to pull some in. Oh, wait, there's two right here. You can sit and watch it. Let's pull these two back. That will help two people. We can just put them right there. From yesterday, just quickly, does somebody have, because always there's the learner that has to think about thinking about. So about the time you're ready to come down this morning, you went, I should have asked that. Or I really disagreed with something that was said. So I'm going to open it to just a couple. Anybody have something you need an answer for? And if it's something I'm going to talk about today sometime, I'll ask you to hold on. But just curious. I was remarkably clear. No.
It's out of curiosity, do you have a follow-up with the boy? That's why you mentioned how he practiced finger against the wood floor.
He went to ongoing, and lucky, I believe, because the parents had so many chronic ongoing problems, ended up with a grandparent who parents gave full custody to. And I think it was a good answer for that family. Yeah, and that was highly unusual because this was 100 years ago. So, yeah. Very experienced. But again, I think that would be far more common today. I'm just prepping for kinship because I'm training it in Ohio on Monday. And it's amazing that we are now up in some states to 70% of our kids in care in kinship homes. And really, families have solved problems as greater than we deal with for generations without our help. We need to leave them alone. Yeah. We are, the government was never meant to parent. I just thought I might announce that. Yeah. Good. Any others? Okay. 3.
Would you say that children acting up before and or after visits was normal?
Yes, the question was, children acting up before and or after visits is normal. Yes, yes, yes. And it's huge because that's something we have been so mistaken about. And I'll do just a real quick descriptor. If you remember the grief cycle, that would be a little bit like you lost your significant other. They died. And I apologize if this is sensitive for someone right now, but it's a perfect illustration. And that person came back every night. You could spend the night with them, you could have dinner with them, as long as you were in the house, you could be with them all night long. But every morning when you woke up, they were gone. How long would it take you to grieve that loss? Forever. Be a constant state. Now, if you're healthy, you're not going to go to work the next day and say, guess who comes back every night? Because they're going to take you away. Okay? Now, so you have no one in this group to talk to about it. And are you going to mention, if you have any anxiety or concerns, you're going to mention it to the person who comes back every night? What are you going to be afraid of? They won't come back. What I've described to you is daily or not daily family contact. That's what happens. And the further apart the worlds are, this is why we need foster parents doing the work they need to do, and I would include one that didn't. When we're out here, that child struggles with that every single time it comes before and afterwards. And the anxiety is almost unbelievably high. Now what they're saying is the more planned, well-planned family contact, and this is Child Welfare League of America did this research, they did a series of child well-being scales for kids in foster care. The more frequent, the more intensive, the more well-planned, the more contact between the adult families, their well-being skyrocketed in places. And we often do the opposite. Let's stop visits. Oh, that's real good. So again, we have kept kids in this insanity by having it once a week or once a month. 4-year-olds forget in 20 minutes they're supposed to pick up their cup off the table. Their mind does not retain enough information, so their anxiety is so great. Because remember, I said yesterday, if it's nebulous to them, they'll create a scenario. And most often, it's mom was hit by a truck and run over, and she's dead and lying in the street somewhere, and nobody will find her. It's that kind of scenario. So again, I hope that helps a little bit. But what they have found is the more consistent, the more closely aligned. And I can tell you, I had kids who were in the criminal justice system in my home who'd never been away from home before. Never. They were from another whole part of Ohio. And that family was on my doorstep within 24 to 48 hours. We can't do that to children. We want them to learn not to steal cars. But I don't want to destroy the rest of their world. And I think sometimes we do what's convenient for us. We make rules that fit us well. Okay, one more question.
You talked about visits to parents who were not involved. What was good in these? Were you saying that if somebody comes to a visit,
As long as they don't act crazy.
Repeat the
is there
question.
some way of...
Well, if they're falling on the floor, I'm not going to let them pull the baby. I'm exaggerating. But yeah, they're not creating havoc. I mean, if they were absolutely sober, not impaired in any way, and they got up in people's face and started getting smart and threatening or horribly negative to their kids, what would you do? Stop the visit and call the police if necessary. I hope we would do that if we saw it in the community. But if they're not, why are we not doing it? I think it's because but that's my opinion. I'm uncomfortable. I found that all my kids had seen their parents using before. Most of the time they cleaned them up, had put them to bed, made sure they had food. I'm sorry, this is when I talk about birth control for adolescent girls. You're encouraging them to have sex. No, I missed that. At 3, their father started having sex with them. If I'd been there, I would have stopped it. All I got to do now is prevent a pregnancy until they can make better decisions. And sometimes we get, like we're going to prevent them seeing. We need to think about it. And I'm not saying it's an absolute. I'm saying the other should never be an absolute. Now, if I've got a meth mom tweaking, I have to really consciously think through what the possibilities are. And I'm not going to let them go take the child out. Yeah. So those are some safety concerns that I don't have. Good. Okay, let's get into this, and I will talk more about that when I talk about special considerations this afternoon. Get my magic little thing. If you remember yesterday, one of the first things I asked about is, why do you see your family? And there were a lot of different reasons. I think some additional reasons with our kids is because they have been inappropriately parentified. They've been the caretaker. They need to know brothers and sisters are safe. They need to know mom is okay. Sometimes they need to know that dad isn't in jail again. Those are issues that get added to why our kids want to see their parents. Sometimes our parents are pretty hopeless. And they need to see their kids because there's that little bit, flicker of hope, that there's still a shot. And we often don't think that way. So when I look at today, I want to talk about, in seeing family, how this gets laid out across the lifetime of the case. And I tend to relate in 12-month segments because Ohio has a more limited time frame. We have to do anniversary of removal 12 months from the date. And we have to be in court on that date to say permanent custody, return home, whatever. Grant custody to family members. So I kind of think in that. So if yours is 15, then we can spread out this arena a little bit. Again, the resources are there. I would encourage you to look for the National Resource article by Peg Hess. In 2003, she surveyed 50 states. 33 or 35 replied, which is a very high return on a survey. And what she was surveying was, what is your statewide policy on family visitation? And the one glaring issue that says more than anything I can say is that not one single state had any written requirements for parents, roles and responsibilities around visitation, or policy with regard to letting kids know you're not coming, or any of those things. All of it was about the caseworker and the foster care. Do we run off parents? I don't know. Again, just quickly, looking at roles and responsibilities. There's a lot of work we do. Sometimes we don't even realize the work that we do. But in planning this, I am the responsible party, if I'm the caseworker, to look at the plan, to get everybody around the table. I have said that I will never attend another meeting in my lifetime if the parents aren't fully part of it the entire time. Now, if they choose not to come and we've sent someone to get them, I'll come. But anything short of that, I'm not going to go, because all it is a gossip session. You can't make one single change in any case, on a caseload, or before you win a court without the people who need to make the change. So why are we wasting our time? We call it staffings. No. Gossip session. So we need to look at that. But I need to get all these folks together as quickly as possible. That's why in the initial days of contact, I call them drive-by visits. You're not going to have time to plan, but in 24 to 48 hours, every child should have a face-to-face contact with that parent. Now, is it going to be highly productive? Is it going to be wonderful? Could be. Might not be. But face-to-face contact says you're still alive. And that may be all we can accomplish for that short period of time. So I'm not going to be able to attend to all these things before that first couple of days. I felt when I was a worker, you should never send a child to bed that night without contact to say goodnight to a family member. So a parent could call, a foster family could call the parent. If parent isn't available, maybe grandma would let parent come over and use the phone. We need to be sure that child has that opportunity.
I think you left something off of your list. I think caseworkers should collaborate and communicate with the guardian ad litem.
Oh, them?
Yes.
And again, when I talk about looking at the plan, that's one of those people I want involved immediately. I want the guardian there. My husband, the attorney, says guardian ad litems who are really outstanding, if they're paid by the court, get about $2.99 an hour. But I said $299. He said no, $2.99. And so there's an option here. I believe everyone needs to be notified about developing this plan. I'm not going to not meet if the legal community can't always get there. But I feel strongly that as a guardian ad litem, I would call as soon as our kids arrive and say, when in the next 24 hours can you come out? And if they can't, then I'm going to go make an appointment at your office. That's what we advise. My husband and I train a lot on weekends. We train foster parents, and that's the first thing he says to foster parents. Has everyone in this room had a guardian in their home, or have you been in the office in the last 30 days? And if you have not, let me tell you in Ohio what the law is about replacing guardians. And I figure I can let him say it, he's a lawyer. But the issue is, I want them openly involved. They can be your best asset, and CASAs are another great resource. I always figure, guardians, don't you guys have to see the kid? Then why don't you go pick up the parents and we'll count that as an extra family contact? How can you make an assessment if they aren't together? I said that in Iowa, and a whole judicial district started making that official. Works. The issue is here, I'm looking at planning. Now, I'm not planning to catch anyone. I don't know enough about this family to write a case plan of what needs to happen in this short initial period, let alone knowing what attachment has to be changed for that child to go home safely. So while I'm working on it, it doesn't mean I'm not going to have contact. Maybe shorter, maybe quicker, it's going to be pretty frequent, but I can't hope for a thorough assessment. So the quicker I get this plan moving, I can then develop ongoing plans. So those first 3 to 5 days, we're going to have contact, but it may be not productive, particularly for where I want to go. But it gives me some initial assessment material. It may be a couple of weeks before I can write that initial plan. Now, a good family contact plan, just like a good case plan, should be revised about 6 times in the life of the case. And it always bothers me if we never have to adjust the case plan, unless we end the case in 30 days. So we need to think about that. Also, they're going to supervise some family interaction. Not everyone, I hope. We're going to have some family contact people, but in those initial periods, it's my only chance to get a good look at how they relate together. That was part of the reason we did all family contact in our home. I could probably have 2 contacts between family and child and know more about the child than living with them for 2 years. I got what the issues were. So we need to think about that for caseworkers. Now I'm not going to say every single supervised visit. I'm not going to say that I'm going to be a party to every one of those, but I need to be working with the people who may be supervising, and we're meeting together along with the parent to say what's working and what isn't. So I need to start that initially. And again, I forgot the last one. There's a reason. It is the sole responsibility of that parent to protect the child. Last child taken from a supervised family visit in the county I live in, was 5 years ago, and the parent took the child to the bathroom in the agency on the second floor and just went out the bathroom window, and no one's ever heard from them since. May not have been all bad. But nonetheless, we can't guarantee that protection, and I refuse to do that, both as a worker and as a professional social worker. That's the best. Now, I'll provide every safety available to me, but I'm not letting parents off the hook. The phases. We've got 3 here, and they will last until the child a permanency decision is made about that child. Now, again, 12 or 15 months should be the standard time frames. Now, initial usually lasts about 8 to 10 or 12 weeks. Some families, you get it real quick. Some, it takes a little longer to know exactly where you're going. At that point, we have a very formal meeting, again with guardians, but with everybody who's involved in the case and the parents. We want to figure out, in this period, this is what we've assessed. These are the parenting skills that the family contact supervisor is going to work with the family on. These are issues the family's got to deal with. You know, Mrs. Johnson, we've been seeing you for 8 weeks now. You've had visits 6 times a week. That's 48 family contacts that have lasted up to 3 or 4 hours. Each time you've come, you have been impaired by drugs or alcohol. You have repeatedly, on 9 different occasions, told me as the caseworker you have no alcohol problem. We either need to go back and look at our case plan and do what you really need done, or we need to look at concurrent case planning if we haven't already done one, because we'll give you 3 more months and then we're switching over. Hard nose. Kids are important. Kids are important. That's the major difference with really strong family contact. You know very quickly, and it's very evidence-based, whether the family is taking it or not. Does it mean they can change? Absolutely. But I don't think you wait till 9 months and say you never went to treatment, now we got a real problem. We don't need to do that. And so, if the family is ready, if we've already made sure family's out and about, you know, the program in Eau Claire's downtown, there's a Dollar Tree down the street, the storefront backs on a big park, there's 3 school playgrounds not too far away. So the family in the first couple of weeks is out and about with the family contact supervisor. Then I am ready to look at the middle phase. Are they strong enough? And in the meeting, I may go to the park with them, but I may wander off, use the restroom, I may go to another part of the park and come back. It's within sight and sound, but I don't need to be on top of them. I'm ready to move toward the middle phase, and we'll talk about these in detail in a minute. Middle phase basically runs another 3 to 9 months. And that is our job then to move away from the family in terms of contact. We're moving to unsupervised, we're moving for more and more responsibility, we're giving the clues that parents need to take charge of what they're doing, and we practice all of that in the initial phase without reducing safety. Then I'm ready for the transitional phase, and that usually is 2, maybe 3 months long. And I'm having meetings very frequently at the end of that initial phase. Then through the middle phase, I'm going to have regular opportunities to sit down and talk about moving forward. Do I believe that families will fall backwards? Yeah, I certainly believe they do. And one thing we need to be very cautious about in that last phase of transition, every family I ever worked with had a misfiring of their brain about a week before the kids went home. Anybody have that experience? Now, we have two things to do here. We can quickly reassess and find out what created the problem. Or as one county who called me to come in and consult took the other tack. Woman had severe history of domestic violence. One of her boyfriends sexually abused the girl. She got rid of him. He went to prison. She changed what she did. She worked very, 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 very hard to get this child back. They were right at the very edge. Child had already started overnight visits. It was 2 weekends before the move. Da-da-da-da-da. The night she was supposed to pick the girl up of that weekend, she didn't show. They called, didn't show. She came the next morning to apologize and to say the old boyfriend had gotten out of jail and she went out with him. The agency came to a halt. They filed for permanent custody. She was with a family whose sister brother-in-law wanted to adopt her. She's 15. She was adopted. It was finalized. But within 3 months of the whole chaotic incident, mom and daughter were having regular contact secretly. And they said, what can we do? Well, what can you do? You're going to have to nullify the adoption. And the adoptive parent said, we can't raise her because she cares so much and wants to be with her parent. We had to nullify the adoption. Her parent had to legally adopt her. And she went on home, and the case was closed. When people have that brain, we need to understand, let's process it and see, because wouldn't you be scared if you really screwed up as a parent? Wouldn't you be scared devastatingly if you were a kid? We need to understand that, again, as a normal behavior. Because at some point we've got to make that move. So it's important to think about those as we look at the phases. Because almost universally it occurs, and I hope we don't go to permanent custody the next morning.
So if you had been in charge at that point in time, what would you have done?
First of all, I would have spent some time talking with the parent alone as a worker. Interviewing her, why was she there? What came out of it, when I talked to her at least, was that boyfriend got out, we wanted to get back together. She had a lapse of stability, partially because she was afraid to take the girl home and she wanted to see if she still loved him. Next morning she came to get the girl, she said, I knew I didn't love him, he was a freak. But she had screwed it up. Now I don't know if that same story came out right away, but I think I might have given it a month or two, or I have an option of moving a kid home on a 30 to 60 day home visit before I do termination of custody.
I have a question. Had the boyfriend injured the girl?
No, this was another boyfriend who had been earlier and was in prison for another charge. But she had been a victim of domestic violence with this guy. Yeah, but the other guy was still there, still in prison. But again, we need to think about the process. And she was horrified and she was terribly sorry. And she continued to live a decent life until we worked it out. Yeah. And sometimes, I've never had an agency that filed for permanent custody the next morning, the first Monday morning, but they really jumped the gun. And they believed if mom did this, there was no reason to make contact with her. They were done. So sometimes we need to think about this. In the initial phase, it is all about relationship building. I'm looking to negotiate, to navigate the system with the parents. I want to build relationships with extended family members. I want to make sure I'm including in that anyone, even if they couldn't take the child. If I was looking at a kin placement and I went to Aunt Susan, who was really stable, who really liked mom and enjoyed her sister, but was very clear about her boundaries, but she said, I have 3 kids of my own in the same age group. I can't take the kids. We often say, well, a real aunt would have taken the kids. She would love them. Let me tell you. And so I need to get her in because she could be a real viable option down the way. So in this initial planning, if mom ends up disappearing intermittently, I want to make sure we move visits to Aunt Susan's house. Why would I do that? Build the relationship. Another reason. Some stability, but Johnny or Susie or Jenny, the kids, are going to be terrified if mom doesn't show up. You talk about acting out. They're going to be crazed, but think of the difference if they go to Aunt Susan's house and get to play all afternoon with their cousins. Mom's going to be a sad situation, but not a tragedy. So I'm building up a better background. So I'm going to get the visits to Aunt Susan's house as much as possible, if there's a history of no-shows, or I think it could end up in that. I'm going to do assessment and goal setting. As soon as I get into the regular contact, I want to see change. My family contact specialist may say, Mrs. Smith, I noticed that when little Timmy rolled off the couch, Timmy is about 18 months old, he was sitting up there, he rolled off the couch. He wasn't really hurt, he fell on the carpet, but you allowed him to cry for 2 minutes and never reached down for him. That's not going to do because Timmy's not going to know you care about him unless you make sure you scoop him up. Sometimes you scoop him up even when he doesn't hurt. So in the next 5 visits, I want to be able to time you, and within 30 seconds, I want Timmy on your lap if he starts to fuss. And every time that happens, I'm going to give you a thumbs up, and I'm going to document it in the record. Mom's going to work harder to do it. About 90% of the time she will, and if she doesn't, I document that that's a day of coaching where she failed to follow through. Okay? 2 to 4 weeks would be a wonderful thing. What we're finding in reality, and I need to change it, is somewhere around 8 to 10 weeks to really get things built in. People are going to be uncomfortable. There's some inherent conflicts between social workers and foster parents, social workers and birth parents and foster parents. You're going to have to do conflict resolution. It's important to do that up front so that people can get over some of those issues. And so I'm going to be really busy in that period, even if I'm not at every single family contact, because when there's a problem, we need to make sure we're dealing with it. Pressure on the child to be good, to get to visits, to not act out, to all of these things, even subtly, creates a lot of conflict. So it's critical to know that. And I'm going to have close supervision. Again, what I used to have to say to my workers is, you don't need to catch our families at things. Our families will do that for themselves. What you're there for is how do I make it better and what are the strengths they have. In most of the families I got, it was harder to see the strengths quickly and much easier to see the downside. So we need to be constantly looking there to see if the strengths are going to offset some of the issues. And in this one, we're not having a half-conscious adult in the back of the room. We're going to have somebody who gets involved, somebody who helps out. I remember those kids on that table, and what a bonding situation if that person in the back of the room had jumped up and went up and helped get them down, smiled, put her arm around the parent and said, boy, they get crazy. Part of it is they didn't have anything to play with. How can we fix this next time, and what are we going to do? Suddenly I want a parent to think. Harsh way through this, we should have the family, the parents planning the family contact. What are we going to do this week? Where's it going to happen? What do you find the best time and frame for you? We need to make sure it happens. I remember being called into a case where Dad was the visitor. Kids were 2 and 4. Mom had left them, serious cocaine addiction, and at the time he was not living in the home. He was her ex-boyfriend, and he didn't even know until the kids came into care. So we got Dad involved, and my phone call was, Dad's not exhibiting strong parenting skills. We'd like to maybe give the kids to him if he can, but he's 22 and not parenting well. Now we do know in males, child development, the frontal lobe of a male brain is not fully developed till late 20s. So you got a great excuse if any of you are that young. So I went in to see what was going on. They were having visits. Now did I say 2 and 4?
Yeah.
From 3:30 to 5:30 on Mondays and Wednesdays, and nothing available but pop and chips. First problem. Second problem was he worked in 5 days, anywhere from 60 to 70 hours. How would your parenting skills be with a 2 and 4-year-old? So I went in and we made a plan, and the first thing the worker said was, well, don't even ask me for Saturdays, because I don't work Saturdays. My first boss in this business said to me, my job is to assure you that you will work somewhere between 45 and 55 hours in the next 7 days. That's the best I can do. Your job is to assure you work no more. And the issue is, it's like a hospital. You can't give medicine on Friday and people survive till Monday. So we came up with what I thought turned out to be a great idea, and they use it now constantly. We got a foster parent who was getting ready to retire. Now, never had violence with Dad, no other issue, but business had to be supervised. So we went back to court. And so this foster parent agreed, because the foster parent said that would be the best thing in the world. I have 2 kids playing t-ball. I drag these little babies all over on Saturdays. It's nuts. Other foster parents said, sure, Dad, pick me up on Saturday morning. Went over, he got the kids ready, she got the kids ready. They got him about 9 o'clock. He slept in. Got him about 9 o'clock. They went out to breakfast, they went to the park, they played, they went over to her house, had family contact. Lunchtime came, he and she took them back home, and he ended up rocking and putting both babies down for a nap. So being the miracle worker that I am, in 7 days, his parenting skills improved dramatically. Well, within 3 months, he had the kids. And he moved in with his parents. Again, we need to think a little bit about what we do to families. And this parent who had her own children, the foster parent, had no time to manage this. That's okay, let's find someone who will. So we need to think about it. Again, reasons. This is assessment. This is mediation. And when I say mediation, it's the very same thing that the judge was talking about yesterday. This is a time for everybody to see positives. We don't need condemnation. We need to mediate and let people come up with their own ideas. Problem solving. Assess the ability for them to provide safety. You know, if in 10 weeks, and I had this in Eau Claire, there was a family, and the family interaction supervisor said, I don't dare leave the room to go to the bathroom in 10 weeks. They've seen their parents every day. Can this family ever take these children home? There are some families that you could say absolutely not. There are some families, if mom's waiting for treatment and she's still getting into treatment, I'm going to stretch that out. If it's an issue of fear or anxiety or mental health issues that are yet untreated, I'm going to say let's hold on for another 2 or 3 months. If it's like the young woman in Des Moines who didn't even remember where she put the baby, I can't help her get smart. No one else can. And that child is at serious risk. That child would be at risk even if they were younger than any school age. So we need to know that it's okay to say family can't do it. And what we're finding is with daily contact, we're able to do that in about 3 to 4 months. We also need to make sure that they're looking at strengths. I want to see a list of strengths that come up during this time, both for kids and for parents. Because this afternoon later when I talk about how it's kid-friendly, the fact is that I'm going to send kids home to a family that may not provide as much care if they're able to self-care. Is that the perfect family life? No. Is there a reasonable amount of safety? Depends on age. Depends on self-care. Depends if their favorite family in the whole world live in the apartment below them. You need to know those things. We also then need to look at what's keeping reunification from happening and decide, can we fix that? Can we change it? And then this is the greatest time in the world to begin showing and facilitating those goals. Lots of modeling, lots of support, lots of, idea gathering. Middle phase. Suddenly, we are actively engaging these parents. They're taking more and more responsibility around the family contact. Planning it, implementing it. If we still need some supervision, they're searching out friends, family members that we can check out who can help with the supervision. They're talking to the guardian ad litem. They're talking to their attorney. Can we go back to court early? Can we see if I'm able to supervise the kids, if I'm willing to have the family contact specialist come in and out during that time? Interesting. One of the greatest resources I ever ran into, just real quickly, was in Wisconsin. A worker came to a training and she said to me, I learned something the other night. She lived in a very small community and she had had 2 kids come out, and mom had a really serious drug and alcohol addiction. And she went to treatment. They worked it all through. They sent the kids home. She had her relapse plan in place. She gets a phone call from a neighbor, because it's a small community, one night and said, these little kids are out, they don't have jackets on, they're in their diapers. I think mom's drunk. Maybe you better do something. And she said, I rode over there cussing and screaming out the window the entire trip. This family should be making it. She said, I could not believe it. She said, I walked in, mom was indeed drunk, 2 kids there, and she said, it suddenly occurred to me, I don't want to put these kids back in here. When mom's clean and sober, she's an adequate parent. And mom was conscious enough to say, call my sponsor. She said, okay. Called the sponsor, and within a half an hour, there were 10 people in the house, all of whom were in her home group at AANA. And they said, the sponsor says, I know Grandma. I know Grandma will take the kids. She said, I called her on my way over. She said, we can drop them with Grandma for a few days, and I have people here that will never leave her alone in the next 15, 20 days. She will be with someone all the time. And by this time, Mom's crying. They're holding a meeting virtually while they're there. And the kids were able to stay with Grandma, see Mom every day, spend most of the day with Mom. Mom stayed clean for 2 weeks. And they were able to slowly reintegrate. So she said, I learned I'm going to plan for relapse around AA and NA for home groups. She said, because those people were right on it. They did not forgive or forget. They said, you got to learn to be different. So again, it's one of those things that you may in this period begin to find there are some folks out there that you can use easily to help with supervision. This is the activity time. You need a series of activities that are developmentally appropriate. Can the parent learn that? Does she understand what is a developmentally appropriate activity and how do we help that? This is the time where you're really doing parenting education. And you know what the difference is? It works just like one-on-one parenting classes forever have worked. It's the relationship that I'm willing to learn from. Not in a large group, talking about things that are meaningless, and then I don't see my kids for 7 days. Important issue. Again, longer, more often, all the time that you can possibly get up and use. If kids can go home for a whole day, that's perfect. By this time, I think with older kids, it's the most opportune moment to make sure mom, if they aren't going home every day, mom's showing up to do homework with them. I had a mom that worked late, and we were fostering a child. It's a young adolescent. So mom, when she got off of work at 6:30, my husband picked her up, brought her over to our house. She finished up the child's homework with her, got her bathed, got her ready, and got her down for the night, and did that every night. So again, we need to think about those are real viable options, and I didn't need to put another kid's bed. I had experience. So again, we need to look at those things as we go through this. Reasons, this is where the parents get to show off, and we need to help them show off. And we can look at progress. This is where I'm documenting for court like crazy. What's working, what isn't working, because the true is the opposite. They're not showing up for the kid. They're not providing good supervision. I may have to pull back on when the kid leaves and how they leave. But I'm giving the parent every opportunity to make it. We also need to look at, have they been able to reduce the risk? Have they looked at their plan and done the things that will reduce risk? One of the reasons we have such a high recidivism rate is because we write plans that never look at what the real risk is. So they fix something. Kid goes home, and guess what? The same risk problem brings the kid back in. We also need to make sure messages are clear. We need to look at their reasoning and reaction in family interactions. I'm going to do family group meetings. I was the foster parent and sent a young man home who had not lived at home since he was 6. And he was 13. It was basically they would not place him for adoption. This was a long time ago. He was a great kid. Not the brightest child in the world. Cute. And we were sending him home with a fairly low-functioning parent. So we set up a program, and I was in the house for 6 months, and we did family meetings 3 times a week so that we can learn to reason together, think about things, find out answers to questions, and it really helped them adjust as a family. So there's no reason we can't do that. And I'm shifting responsibility. Is it a risk? Absolutely, it's a risk. Is it a reasonable risk with good planning? Absolutely, it is a reasonable risk. If you all remember, several years ago, there was a state that was not allowing children to spend overnight at home until they were returned permanently. They did not have an unsupervised visit during that entire time. In 4 months, 2 families killed their children. They held the state criminally liable. They said, you set it up. Worker, administrator, etc. You set it up. Talk about unreasonable risk. You couldn't even tell if they could manage the child by themselves for an hour and a half in the community. So again, we all worry about liability. The world is fraught with liability. We get up in the morning, we're taking on liability. The issue is that at some point we have to take calculated risk. And by the time I'm doing middle phase, I'm documenting it very clearly. And this is the great time to use community supports. Is there a church affiliation they've had some contact with? Does the kid still remember the neighbor who worked at the Dairy Mart store and used to visit with him in the evening and let him fill the shelves for a couple of dollars? We need to make sure we're re-entering all of those supports while we're doing it.
Do you have a caseworker following up to make sure that those community supports are working?
Yes, because as a case manager, you know, we used to do case managers because we thought we could give them a lot more cases. A good case manager has to work the case. But again, checking out. I would start bringing my community supports in when I did home visits during a visitation. Let's talk about the guy from the Dairy Food Mart. Let's talk about Mrs. Smith who said she'd take you to Wednesday night Bible study. Let's have those people show up and see how things are going. And again, confidentiality, we just give permission. I always have to say that my husband, the lawyer, says confidentiality is a myth created by social workers who don't have privilege. So, sharing that, moving right along. Last one. This is when the case goal is in sight. The big issue is we don't make ourselves dispensable. Social service people are fake people. We are only there because there was a problem. We don't live next door. We don't play in their community. The issue is we need to make sure if we've taken Mrs. Smith to the food pantry once a month for the last 4 months so the kids can do day visits at home, we need to find somebody from the food pantry who regularly goes there and connect Mrs. Smith. We often don't do that. If there's a settlement house, a recreation center, any of that, we need to go in and find out who are direct contacts that can support this family. That's making ourselves dispensable. And it's hard for us because in the dictionary you see social worker, control freak is the first definition. I can say it because I am one, but we got to let go of it. So I'm going to make sure this happens. I'm going to plan ahead. This is when I'm maximizing my contact with the family in and out of visitation time or family contact time. I'm going to make lots of contacts in the community, so I'm a busy bee. The fact is I'm going to be rid of the case. And I need to look at the remaining stressors. Have these kids, 6 of them, been separated for a year now? Have they not been provided family time and family, even parenting time as a group? Do they see each other outside the presence of their parents? And then I go, okay, Johnny, Susie, Sam, Paul, and Jude, and Rita are coming home tomorrow. Have a great one. The issue is I need to look at who can come home the quickest, who can be the best resource for the parent that's there. So we do this in a planful manner. And again, transition phase has one other thing. And I didn't put this slide in. That is for the family who is not going to be keeping the child. Even if that child is in a grandparent's home, the role for mom will indeed change. We need to help with that transition family contact. We know if a child is going to not return home, besides the life book, one of the most important things we can ever do for that child is a transition visit. And however you need to do it. I don't care if you use cue cards. I don't care if you have a monitor. The president uses one, so I don't know why you can't use a monitor. I don't care if you have to prop them up in a chair and stand behind them to tell them what to say. But there must be 3 messages transmitted in that transition visit. I love you, which includes it's not your fault. I can't take care of you, and that's not your fault. And you have my permission to love someone else. I remember getting a goodbye visit, and those are videotaped or written in letters. I like videotape because kids can rewatch them. And I got a note with this videotaped transition visit, and the worker had written, he isn't even slurring his words very much. Is it a good job? Severe alcoholic. So again, we need to assure that transition happens for the child. Because then, as a worker, I have to take that child through grieving. I have to help them grieve. I would never take a kid to counseling with someone in the community who does not know how to do grief work, in addition to whatever their specialty is. Because that child has to grieve, or they're never going to be able to accept the new family. So that's an important issue, even for kids who aren't going home. And people say, well, parents haven't done anything, they're not going to show up. I think you would be amazed if you said you can finally do the one thing that's best for your child. A number of folks will. And if you can't get a parent, then it needs to be a person in the family who knows the whole situation. Okay, questions? We got a couple minutes.
What have you done in situations where one of the parents is incarcerated, but somebody is going to come back eventually within a year?
I'm going to handle that in special considerations a little later, but I have found historically that people who don't like taking children to visit parents in jail, it's their problem. Many of our kids have seen their parents in jail for years. So again, we'll talk about that this afternoon, but I think it's a critical issue. Even I had a parent who wouldn't be out till the child was 25. But had a great influence on that child's life.
Yeah, a great suggestion about incorporating the to offset if a parent is a no-show. But what do you do when you don't have an extended family that's appropriate, or what other suggestion might you offer? Because
Another family friend.
Mom not showing up, and then you think, well, God, is this much traumatizing?
Yeah. A neighbor. I switched them very quickly to the foster home, because if you think the opposite way, you get the kid up in the morning, you dress them all real nice, because you're going back to the agency. The child sits and waits. A foster parent sometimes doesn't take them, so some stranger picks them up and drives them in for the visit. The child sits by themselves in the office and waits, so you can see the stress building. And then nobody shows, and sometimes if I'm a really busy worker, I forget they're in there, so it's an hour before I'm connecting with them. And then I get to drop them off with the foster parent. So I'm not going to do that. First of all, I remember one time very clearly, I just put the kid in the car and drove him to the house. I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith. I have no idea why you chose not to come today, but your child needs to know, so will you tell him? And that's why I insisted, if you don't call to cancel and talk to your child about why, expect me. Kids need to know the truth. I'm not going to lie to a child, and I can't even answer them. How would I know why mom didn't come? And I'm not making things up. And so moving into the foster home is a much more casual setting. He just goes out and plays with Tommy next door. And oh, by the way, if mom knows it, she's going to stop by.
Agencies here aren't I don't think I have any foster care that allows them to come in, and now that they're separating this out even further, I think that's the trouble of having to.
Well,
Can you say that what she said? I couldn't hear.
I'm sorry, she was saying she doesn't have any agencies that even expect their foster parents to have contact at home. It's illegal and unethical. I have some questions about that.
I disagree with that. I'm a foster parent, and I do visits in my home.
Yes.
And I always have, and I know a lot of other foster parents do. I think you need to set the expectation, and I think they'll do it. But if you continue to have the bar low, they're not going to follow through.
I mean that seriously. Every single state I've been in, that has been the approach. The worker says, never, ever, ever, ever. And then you find these magic people who have been doing it for 20 years. They just thought the workers would be upset, so they don't say anything. And we're having a horrible problem here, and that was the expectation. If the director of the agency comes into pre-service and says, I can't license you unless you're going to work with parents in some capacity. It may not always be your house, it may be eating at McDonald's. It may be phone calls and letters. It may be you getting report cards together, having pictures for the kids. All that's a possibility. I have a great handout, by the way, if somebody wants it. On a continuum, it's a bridge that shows going across how foster parents work with birth parents. The issue is we need to do that. Foster parent really isn't very useful if they're not doing that. And I don't mean that to be pejorative. I mean it because I need them desperately when I'm the caseworker. Yeah.
How do we get that handout?
My contact information, I think, is in there. Is my email in there?
I don't recall, but it's definitely something that if we can also, if we're able to, we can either send it out or else put it on the website. We plan on putting all the materials with this summit on our website as well. So.
Is somebody, yeah.
And your email address is on there, Norma.
Is it?
Yes.
Yahoo.com. So, that's what I will do. Just help me remember, email me when I get back.
Yeah.
And I will send it to you, and then you guys can print it off. It's a great handout.